Hello, everyone. This is Advocating for a Child's Mental Health Well-Being by Stacy, Julia, Elbisa, and Jade. Our case study. Mary is a clinical mental health counselor who works for an agency that specializes in providing mental health services to children and adolescents diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. Mary has just completed an initial meeting with her new client, Matthew. Matthew is an 11-year-old male who has recently started middle school. Matthew's parents have noticed that he is having difficulty with the transition to a new school and think that him seeing a counselor will help. After her initial meeting with Matthew, Mary feels that it would be beneficial for him to receive special education services from his school in addition to his counseling sessions. Mary recommends Matthew's parents request their son to be evaluated for special education services at his school. Matthew's parents denied the recommendation, saying that they do not want their son to be identified as a special needs student, preferring he receive private services only. Given that her client's parents are unwilling to comply with her recommendation, Mary takes it upon herself to contact the school to make a referral on Matthew's behalf. Mary feels uneasy about going against the parents' wishes, but believes that her client will benefit greatly from receiving additional services from his school. After all, Mary has her client's best interest in mind and feels it is her duty as Matthew's counselor to advocate for his well-being. What ethical code should be taken into consideration for this case? What are some possible laws, statutes, that need to be considered regarding this case? Ethical considerations. A1A. Primary responsibility. The primary responsibility of counselors is to respect the dignity and promote the welfare of clients. It is Mary's primary responsibility as a counselor to respect Matthew's abilities and the reason why he is in counseling. A1C. Counseling plans. Counselors and their clients work jointly in devising a counseling plan that offer reasonable promise of success and are consistent with the abilities, temperament, developmental level, and circumstances of clients. Counselors and clients regularly review and revise counseling plans to assess their continued viability and effectiveness, respecting clients' freedom of choice. Mary should work with Matthew and his parents in developing a counseling plan to help address Matthew's presenting issues. A1D. Support network involvement. Counselors recognize that support networks hold various meanings in the lives of clients and consider enlisting the support, understanding, and involvement of others: religious, spiritual, community leaders, family members, and friends, as positive resources when appropriate with client consent. Mary needs to take into consideration the importance of Matthew's support system, that being his parents. Matthew's school can also be seen as a support network for Matthew's well-being. A2D. Inability to give consent. When counseling minors, incapacitated adults, or other persons unable to give voluntary consent, counselors seek the assent of clients to services and include them in decision-making as appropriate. Counselors recognize the need to balance the ethical rights of clients to make choices, their capacity to give consent or assent to receive services, and parental or familial legal rights and responsibilities to protect these clients and make decisions on their behalf. Given that Matthew is 11 years old, he is unable to give proper consent. A4B. Personal values. Counselors are aware of and avoid imposing their own values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Counselors respect the diversity of clients, trainees, and research participants and seeking training in areas in which they are at risk of imposing their values onto clients, especially when the counselor's values are inconsistent with the client's goals or are discriminatory in nature. Mary should not impose any of her personal values on Matthew or his parents during her counseling sessions. A6B. Extending counseling boundaries. Counselors consider the risks and benefits of extending current counseling relationships beyond conventional parameters. Examples include attending a client's formal ceremony, wedding, commitment ceremony, or graduation. purchasing a service or product provided by a client, accepting unrestricted borrowing, and visiting a client's ill family member in the hospital. In extending these boundaries, counselors take appropriate professional precautions such as informed consent, consultation, supervision, and documentation to ensure that judgment is not impaired and no harm occurs. Mary may have extended her boundaries by contacting Matthew's school. A6C, documenting boundary extensions. If counselors extend boundaries as described in A6A and A6B, they must officially document prior to the interaction when feasible the rationale for such interaction, the potential benefit, and anticipated consequences for the client or former client and other individuals significantly involved with the client or former client. When unintentional harm occurs to a client or former client, or to an individual significantly involved with the client or former client, the counselor must show evidence of an attempt to remedy such harm. Contacting Matthew's school may be a boundary extension that Mary would need to document. A7A, advocacy. When appropriate, counselors advocate at individual, group, institutional, and social levels to address potential barriers and obstacles that inhibit access and/or the growth and development of clients. Mary is trying to advocate for Matthew's overall well-being by contacting his school in hopes that he can receive proper help from the services in the school supplies. A7B, confidentiality and advocacy. Counselors obtain client consent prior to engaging in advocacy efforts on behalf of an identifiable client to improve the provision of services and to work towards removal of systematic barriers or obstacles that inhibit client access, growth, and development. Mary cannot share any information regarding her client because she does not have proper consent from her client and his parents. B1B, respect for privacy. Counselors respect the privacy of prospective and current clients. Counselors request private information from clients only when it is beneficial to the counseling process. Matthew's parents have a strong desire to protect their son's privacy by not disclosing his mental disorder to the school. Mary needs to be respectful of this wish. B1C, respect for confidentiality. Counselors protect the confidentiality information of prospective and current clients. Counselors disclose information only with appropriate consent or with sound legal or ethical justification. Mary has disclosed confidential information regarding her client without proper consent. B3E, transmitting confidentiality information. Counselors take precaution to ensure the confidentiality of all information transmitted through the use of any medium. In contacting Matthew's school, Mary needs to make sure that she can rely the information confidentiality in the method that she chooses to make contact with. B5A, responsibility to clients. When counseling minor clients or adult clients who lack the capacity to give voluntary informed consent, counselors protect the confidentiality of information received in any medium, in the counseling relationship as specified by federal and state laws, written policies, and applicable ethical standards. Since Matthew is 11, it is Mary's responsibility to Matthew to protect the confidentiality of what is talked about in the counseling sessions. B5B, responsibility to parents and legal guardians. Counselors inform parents and legal guardians about the roles of counselors and the confidentiality nature of the counseling relationship. Consistent with current legal and custodial arrangements, counselors are sensitive to the cultural diversity of families and respect the inherent rights and responsibilities of parents/guardians regarding the welfare of their children, such charges according to the law. Counselors work to establish an appropriate collaborative relationship with parents/guardians to best serve clients. Mary needs to talk to Matthew's parents regarding the method of the counseling sessions and her limitations in confidentiality. B5C, Release of confidentiality information. When counseling minors, clients, or adult clients who lack the capacity to give voluntary consent to release confidentiality information, counselors seek permission from an appropriate third party to disclose information in such instances. Counselors inform clients consistent with their level of understanding and take appropriate measures to safeguard client confidentiality. Mary would need both Matthew's and parents' consent before contacting the school. C5. Non-discrimination. Counselors do not condone or engage in discrimination against prospective or current clients, students, employees, supervisees, or research participants based on age, culture, disability, ethnicity, race, religion, spirituality, gender identity, sexual orientation, marital partnership status, language preference, socioeconomic status, immigration status, or any basis prescribed by the law. Mary needs to understand Matthew's autism and not use discrimination against him. D1B. Forming relationships. Counselors work to develop and strengthen relationships with colleagues from other disciplines to best serve clients. It may be beneficial for Mary to reach out to the school counselor at Matthew's school to work together in treating Matthew. E1A. Assessment. The primary purpose of educational, mental health, psychological, and career assessment is to gather information regarding the client for a variety of purposes, including, but not limited to, client decision-making, treatment planning, and forensic proceedings. Assessment may include both qualitative and quantitative methodologies. A full psychological assessment would be beneficial for both Mary and the parents to have a better understanding of how Matthew is affected by his ASD. I1A. Knowledge. Counselors know and understand the ACA Code of Ethics and other applicable ethics code from professional organizations or certification and licensure bodies of which they are members. Lack of knowledge or misunderstanding of an ethical responsibility is not a defense against a charge of unethical conduct. As a counselor, it is Mary's duty to be competent in her ability to understand and implement the ACA Code of Ethics within her practice. I1B. Ethical decision making. When counselors are faced with an ethical dilemma, they use and document, as appropriate, an ethical decision-making model that may include, but is not limited to, consultation, consideration of relevant ethical standards, principles and laws, generation of potential courses of action, deliberation of risks and benefits, and selection of an objective decision based on the circumstances and welfare of all involved. As a counselor, it is Mary's duty to use a decision-making model to make the best decision regarding herself and her client. I1C. Conflicts between ethics and laws. If ethical responsibilities conflict with the law, regulations and/or governing legal authority, counselors make known their commitment to the ACA Code of Ethics and take steps to resolve the conflict. If the conflict cannot be resolved using this approach, counselors acting in the best interest of the client may adhere to the requirements of the law, regulation, and/or governing legal authority. Mary may run into conflicts between the ACA Code of Ethics, the ASCA Code of Ethics, and the North Carolina law. I2C. Consultation. When uncertain about whether a particular situation or course of action may be in violation of the ACA Code of Ethics, counselors consult with other counselors who are knowledgeable about ethics and the ACA Code of Ethics, with colleagues, or with appropriate authorities such as the ACA Ethics and Professional Standards Department. It would have been best if Mary consulted with a supervisor before making the decision she made regarding Matthew. North Carolina